Okay. I'll call this meeting to order. It catches you off guard every time, eh?
I didn't realize you were angry this morning.
I'm not angry. So this is meeting number 3. Today is Monday, March 6th of 2023. And just a note to members of the public, all cell phones, pagers, and PDAs are to be turned off. Members of the public who are attending and participating virtually are reminded to keep their microphones muted until they're acknowledged to speak. Additionally, and for your information, please be advised that this meeting will be live streamed as well as recorded and available on the township's website. So my name is William Riley, and I'll be the chair of tonight's meeting. I have to also mention here, comments from the public for a matter that is on the agenda may be provided in person by attending the meeting and advising the chair during the request to address an item on the agenda section of the agenda. For those individuals that are unable to attend the meeting in person, you may submit comments for matters that are on the agenda by either emailing jdyson@westlincoln.ca before 4:30 on the day of the meeting. Comments submitted will be considered to be public information read into the public record, or by contacting the clerk's department to request a Zoom link to attend the meeting virtually. This meeting is being live streamed, as already mentioned before, but the link to watch the meeting can be found on the township website, which is, I guess, well, we're getting really descriptive here. Township website by selecting the Township Office tab at the top of the website, then clicking Council and/or Standing Committee Meeting tab, and you'll scroll down there, and you can find the link from there. And and then this meeting, as mentioned before, is being recorded and will be available through our Township YouTube channel approximately 48 hours after the meeting. And we'll go from there. All right, so welcome everybody. Great to see everyone. And pardon me. I'll mention Councillor Bell has sent his regrets, so he won't be participating this evening, but he wishes he could be. And so we'll go into the land acknowledgement statement here. I have it over 2 pages here. So, all right. The Township of West Lincoln, being a part of the Niagara region, is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Township of West Lincoln, as part of the regional municipality of Niagara, stands with all of its Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. So at this point, I'm going to look around members of the committee here to see if there's any pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest. Not seeing or hearing any. We have no public meetings tonight, which is a rarity. My goodness. So we'll move forward to members of committee here to see if there's any changes in order of items on the agenda. Not seeing that as well. So now we move forward to our appointments. We have 3 appointments tonight. Our first appointment, which is item P1823, is going to be done by Steve Weaver from GSP Group, Inc., and it's regarding the official plan amendment number 63, Smithville Urban Boundary Expansion. It's a PowerPoint presentation, and because this is kind of coming on from staff, we're going to give them a little bit more than 10 minutes. Normally appointments get about 10 minutes, but because of the presentation itself and coming from staff in the municipality, will permit a little extra time there. I see Steve's already signed on here. And so Steve, I don't know how much you heard there, but the floor is yours, but if you can be mindful of time, that would be wonderful.
Thank you very much, and good evening, Chair Riley and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
We can, yes.
Excellent. I do have a brief slideshow to share, so I'll just put that on screen now. Did that come up okay?
Yes, we can see that.
Okay, great. So the purpose of my presentation is to provide an update on the Smithville Master Community Plan and to outline some proposed modifications to previously adopted official plan amendments for committee's consideration. Further details on this are provided in the staff report, which is PD 17-2023, and the related attachments which are included in your agenda package. Just a quick agenda for the presentation. I'll start with some background information just to recap the purpose of the official plan amendments, but the bulk of the presentation will be spent on policy updates in the text of OPA 63, official plan amendment number 63, and then there are a few mapping modifications proposed to highlight for OPA 63 as well. I will also outline the next steps as we wrap up the master community plan process. And then finally, I'll be available for any questions that council may have during the presentation or afterwards. So as a bit of background, the study area for the master community plan, or MCP, is 685 hectares and encompasses the land surrounding the existing community of Smithville. The location map on this slide shows the area selected for urban area expansion from that original larger study area. There was some land that was not included in the urban expansion, north of the gray area shown here between Yonge Street and the Hydro Corridor. So the urban expansion area is approximately 540 hectares and is shown in gray. The existing urban area of Smithville is shown in yellow. Implementation of the master community plan as a secondary plan to guide and direct future land use, servicing, and transportation improvements involves 2 official plan amendments. So the first of those is OPA 62, which was adopted by Council on July 18th, 2022. That OPA added 2051 population and employment growth forecasts to the township official plan, as well as new mapping for the revised settlement area boundary for Smithville. And that was required to conform with the forecasts and the new urban boundary shown in the region's new official plan for Smithville. A few minor modifications to OPA 62 have been identified through the region's review as the approval authority, and those are identified in attachment 2 to the staff report. I won't get into the details of those because they are fairly minor text modifications for OPA 62. OPA 63 was the second of the 2, and it was adopted by Council on August 11th of 2022. This amendment is more detailed in nature and adds land use permissions and policies, natural heritage schedule and mapping, transportation plan, and servicing and phasing plans and policies to the township official plan, specifically for the urban expansion area. As a secondary plan, direction is provided for more detailed land use planning, which will occur for smaller geographic areas referred to as block plan areas, and also for more detailed servicing studies referred to as Master Environmental Servicing Plans, or MESPs. Both of these OPAs have been submitted to the region for approval. The region has the authority to approve those OPAs as they are, as adopted by the township, or to modify the OPAs, or to refuse the OPAs. And the process that we've been working towards is an approval with modifications. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is to highlight some proposed modifications that we would like to submit to the region for consideration in their decision. Those modifications are proposed as a result of some further dialogue that's taken place since Council adopted the OPAs last summer. Specifically with the consultants representing the landowner group, as well as further information that's emerged since then with the related servicing and transportation master plans and some discussions that we've had with regional staff. These modifications with supporting rationale are also summarized in the table in attachment number 3 to the staff report. So just to summarize some of the modifications, you'll get a sense that many of these are quite minor, wordsmithing of certain policies to add clarity or consistency. The slides here just show the original policies in black font, and the removals with the strike throughs in red, and the underline in red is the additional or revised text. So one of the components of the master community plan was a subwatershed study, and it identified conceptual locations for future stormwater management facilities to service future development areas. And the consultants for the landowners did express some concerns about the policies and how they refer to stormwater management facility locations, and how much flexibility is afforded to refine the locations of the stormwater facilities. So the minor text changes shown here are just to be consistent and clear on the intent of the mapping of the future stormwater management facility locations, and to provide some flexibility in terms of where they're ultimately located and how they're cited in final development plans. Regarding the natural heritage system, this is really the focus of the majority of the comments that were received from the landowner group. The natural heritage system policies include a natural heritage or a natural cover target. And this builds on an existing policy in the township's official plan. It's found in section 10.3.2, which identifies a target of 30% of the land area in the township to be forest cover or wetland cover through the development and implementation of watershed and environmental planning studies. So the appropriate application of that township-wide target for the urban expansion area for Smithville was assessed through the sub-watershed study for the master community plan. And it was determined through that process that there is insufficient wetland and woodland cover to achieve a 30% cover within the urban expansion area based solely on wetlands and woodlands. So as such, the policies provide that the full range of natural heritage system features in the urban expansion area can be counted towards meeting the target. So it adds some greater flexibility within the urban area. And we also added through the definition of the natural cover target things like parks, trails, and stormwater management facilities that contribute to achieving a continuous linked natural heritage and open space system. This was one of the objectives for the area identified through the initial community consultation and visioning, not only from a natural heritage perspective, but also to create that linked public open space system. So a small modification is proposed to this policy shown on this slide as the definition of natural cover target, again, to add a little more flexibility on the areas that could be counted towards meeting that target, and specifically to add green servicing and utility corridors and trail corridors to that definition. Similarly, there's some additional flexibility proposed with respect to the refinement of the mapping of the natural heritage system and some clarity of what happens if there is future refinement of that mapping based on further study, both for natural heritage features and for natural hazards. And the additional wording shown in red here, just to summarize, provides additional direction for how to interpret and apply such a mapping refinement, allowing for the adjoining land use designation to apply. So the graphic on the left-hand side of the slide just shows if you have a residential area adjoining a natural heritage system designation, and there's some refinement of the boundary between the two, there would be some give and take allowed in the land use designations through these refinement policies. Further policies detail the refinement provisions for specific components of the natural heritage system. In this case, linkage areas and recommended restoration areas. Linkages are really about making sure there is that connectivity between the components of the natural heritage system. And restoration areas are recommended to ensure that areas that are already designated as natural heritage or have had some recent past, heritage and natural heritage characteristics and ecological roles and functions to them are restored through the master community plan process. So to align the policy regarding linkages and recommended restoration areas with the natural cover target and add some greater flexibility, the requirement to ensure the overall land area is maintained for those areas is proposed to be revised to require that the area simply contribute to achieving the natural cover target in combination with those other areas that I just spoke of that may be included in that calculation. Regarding conceptual buffers, so with many of the types of natural heritage features that are identified, it's typical practice to require a buffer around the edge of that feature, so there's a bit of a transitional area between development and natural environment. The natural heritage system component of the sub-watershed study recommended a 30-meter buffer around the natural heritage system. And the changes to this slide simply relate to those buffers and how they're interpreted and how they may be refined going forward through more detailed environmental impact studies and block planning. So the proposed modifications clarify the intent that the final width of the buffers required around these features may vary from what's shown on the schedule to the OPA, where an alternative width is justified through an improved environmental impact study. This allows for more detailed study to establish an appropriate buffer width for specific features and maintains the requirement for township approval of the final buffer widths. in consultation with the region and the NPCA. There was one submission, and it's included in your agenda package, that noted specific concern with the words in the original policy shall generally be 30 meters in width regarding the buffers, and we have proposed some modifications to remove that wording. Next, regarding linkages specifically, the subwatershed study recommended linkages as part of the natural heritage system, again, to ensure that connectivity among the natural heritage features. They're shown in the OPA 63 mapping, and some rewording is proposed for the linkage policies, again, to clarify and allow some flexibility for refinement of the linkages based on more detailed studies and review. Again, on linkages, this policy makes specific reference to a linkage in the west area of the master community plan area. And you can see the area just circled in with a red oval. A modification is proposed just to add some clarity with respect to the intended width of that linkage in the west area, which should be determined based on an approved environmental impact study. For the recommended restoration areas, the subwatershed study work identified a few of these areas, again, based on the background work that was done and in consideration of areas that are already designated for environmental protection as well. Recommended restoration areas are mapped, and in some cases, these are areas that are already designated as mentioned in the township official plan. And the policies provide that this mapping may be refined through further study. So the proposed modifications are to this section are really for consistency and clarity of wording with respect to refinements that may be considered through further study, and to relate the amount of area to be conserved back to that natural cover target, that 30% target. So to add flexibility and through further review with the subwatershed study team, it was determined that buffers in that second clause at the bottom will not be required for restoration areas. So again, that gives a little bit more flexibility when development plans are prepared for these areas. Moving on to natural hazards. So one of the types of natural hazards identified in the study area is karst features, and karst refers to a type of landform that's characterized by things like sinking streams and limestone rock formations and underground rock formations that may be hazardous to development. Those were identified through the subwatershed study work. The policies, though, require further, more detailed study of individual karst features through what's called a karst hazards assessment. And those would be submitted with development applications or as part of the block plan process for specific areas of the study area. And the proposed rewording to this part of the policy just acknowledges that the karst study completed as part of the subwatershed study identified some potential high constraint features, but the more detailed karst assessments of individual features will determine the final constraint level and appropriate setbacks. And that's, again, just some rework of the policies for the karst hazard. Seen here, typically a 50-meter setback is the default requirement, but those karst hazard assessments done on individual features and areas will ultimately be used to help determine the final setbacks required and any other mitigation requirements that may apply. And they are subject to the approval of the NPCA in accordance with NPCA policies. Regarding the transportation policies, the original draft policies or the adopted policies had identified a minimum 20-meter right-of-way width for local roads in the township's jurisdiction. As we know, there are different classifications of roads identified in the Transportation Master Plan, and through further review of that work, it's been determined that some roads, such as arterial B roads, collector roads, and rural roads do require, or in some cases already have, a wider road allowance. So that table has been proposed to be added as a modification to match with the Transportation Master Plan work. This section does allow the township to consider reduced road allowance widths if that's requested in the future. It doesn't obligate the township to approve reduced road allowance widths. That would be determined on a case-by-case basis as requests are made, and based on township staff recommendations. And then lastly, on this section of the policy, Industrial Road between London Road and St. Catherine Street does have a lot of underground infrastructure within the corridor, and we'll have more in the future. So due to infrastructure and spacing requirements, there is a wider right-of-way required for that section of Industrial Road. So that's a quick summary of the text modifications that are proposed. Regarding the maps, again, just really minor. For this map, it shows the block plan areas. So these are the areas that be subject to more detailed planning. We did notice that there were some boundary corrections that need to be made between blocks 8 and 9 and 9 and 10 as circled on the map at the bottom. Similarly, on this schedule, a couple of boundary corrections to the faint gray line shown here and here. Again, same change, but on the land use plan for the south community area, just delineating the division between the different block plan areas. This is the natural heritage map schedule, and on this schedule it was identified through the review that one of the linkages was hard to see because of some layering issues. So there's a correction there as circled in red. Another small correction on Schedule P. So this is the development staging areas and subphase areas. A line was missing here between 1A and 1B, and between 2B and 3A and 3A and 3B, there was a small adjustment to the line. So those are the map changes. In terms of next steps, you will hear tonight from some delegates who will, I think, identify some of the information in their written submissions where there are other changes or modifications that were requested. Those changes relate to residential densities in part, staging of development, and alternative servicing options for the west area, and some concerns with the natural heritage system policies and mapping. I'm available to assist council in any, or the committee in any way needed tonight to help address any questions from those delegations. Just to confirm with the committee, we have reviewed the density provisions in detail. They are the same density provisions in the balance of the township OP for low and medium density areas. And the modeling work that we've done demonstrates that those density provisions are adequate to meet the population targets and to meet the overall greenfield density target of 50 people jobs per hectare. And we've also provided plans that show it will accommodate the unit types envisioned, including there's some concerns that have been raised about the densities being too low to accommodate stacked townhomes and back-to-back townhomes. But we have provided the landowners group with an example of a plan where it shows that that can be accommodated, as well as some analysis of the designated areas showing that those units types are possible. Regarding the review of alternative servicing options, I just wanted to highlight that the staging of development plan does, and the policies allow for some consideration of changes to the order of development. This is a 30-year plan, so it is going to take some updates in the future periodically to reflect new information and infrastructure studies and environmental assessments that will be completed along the way. And so, those submissions can be made as part of block planning processes and development applications to seek an alternative to the staging of development. It is subject to some criteria and justification requirements, but that's gives some flexibility to adapt to new information in the future. So regarding next steps, if Township Council is satisfied with the proposed OPA modifications, those will be confirmed with the region. And then both OPA 62 and 63 are subject to regional approval and are anticipated to be considered by Regional Council, I believe, on April 5th. After Regional Council has rendered its decision, notice of that decision will be issued. And at the township level, there will be a notice of completion required because we were following the Integrated Planning and Environmental Assessment Act process. So that relates to the related servicing and transportation master plans as well. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to entertain any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. I think at this point, we'll just park that. We'll get through the rest of the delegations, and then as we go into that's one of the first items we're dealing with under staff reports. Maybe we'll call you back up for that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. So at this point, I'll go to our next appointment here. Apologies. So we have under item P1923, Jennifer Meter, Legal Counsel, Phelps Homes Limited, and JTG Holdings Incorporated. So please step forward. Kevin, our IT guy, will show you, if he hasn't already, what you need to do. What I will ask first is, I'll give you a second to settle in there. I'll just get you to state your name, your address, and then you're good to go.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Meter. I'm counsel to Phelps Homes Limited and JTG Holdings Incorporated, who are landowners within the secondary plan that you are considering tonight under OPA 63. And my address is 15 Bold Street, Hamilton, Ontario. I cannot tell you my postal code off the top of my head. I apologize for that.
That's sister the clerk department, so thank you.
All right. And with me in the gallery, Mr. Chair, to assist me in answering any questions that the committee may have is John White and David Samus of Phelps Homes, John Henricks of NPG Planning, Barry Myler of Myler Ecological, and Colin Dugan of S. Llewellyn Engineering. So our clients have participated extensively in the processes that have culminated in OPA 63 as adopted, and here we are today considering modifications. They have participated both financially through the funding of all of the background studies and substantively through their consulting team and at all the stakeholder meetings that were held. Written and oral submissions were made on June 24th of last year, June 27th of last year, and November 25th of last year. And now, in addition to this delegation, you have written submissions from NPG Planning Solutions dated March 2nd of 2022. And I have a couple of, that written submission was provided electronically. I have a couple of hard copies if anyone does require it.
I'll ask that you just give it maybe at the end of your presentation, that you can hand that to the clerk, so the clerk's office can have that, and then we'll go from there.
Certainly, thank you. Our clients, as I believe you will know, are also members of the Smithville Landowners Group. The planning consultant for the group is Paul Lowes. And of course, the landowner group has also participated extensively throughout the process. And unfortunately, despite the multifaceted participation, most of our clients' comments, particularly relating to the natural heritage system, transportation, phasing, and implementation, have not been adequately addressed in the version of OPA 63 that was adopted or through the modifications that are being presented to you this evening. And my submissions, I'm just going to be very brief, Mr. Chair, members of committee. They will essentially follow the detailed comments provided by NPG in the March 2nd, 2023 written correspondence. So as I said, the key concerns relate to natural heritage, transportation, residential densities, phasing, and implementation. With respect to the natural heritage system, our clients continue to have concerns with the mapping and policies related to restoration areas, coverage targets, conceptual buffers, and linkages. The policies are overly onerous, requiring more land than is necessary to protect the features. They are arbitrary, and they do not properly balance with provincial objectives for providing compact development and optimization of services. With respect to transportation policies, our clients continue to have concerns with the natural heritage, concerns that the natural heritage policies and mappings may prejudice the future environmental assessment processes that will be required to determine the final road network. And there's also a need for narrower road cross-sections in the network to again ensure that the appropriate balance with provincial policy objectives for compact neighborhoods and efficient use of infrastructure. In terms of the proposed residential densities, as set out in NPG's correspondence, there is a significant disconnect between the proposed land use designations and their assigned densities, which will clearly render the proposed land uses unachievable. Given the unnecessarily expansive natural heritage system and the road network, that there is a good chance that those expansive land takings will decrease the amount of development land available to accommodate residential development. And with that, coupled with the low density, the low densities that are assigned, there's a very good chance that the development of the community will be financially unfeasible for the developers, or alternatively will result in unattainable housing for those in the market. And as we know, that would run counter to the current objectives of alleviating an ongoing housing crisis. So there's not an appropriate balance between what can be achieved in terms of residential development density and what the municipality wants to take in terms of lands for natural heritage and road network. In terms of implementation, one of our clients' main concerns at this stage of the process is whether the township has the appropriate resources, including procedures, financial strategies, including cost sharing of infrastructure, and staffing to implement the secondary plan. We understand that this is the largest scale development that the township will have been faced with, historically speaking. And my clients are seriously concerned that the township may not be equipped to bring it to fruition in a timely manner in an effort to address the ongoing housing crisis. So we're respectfully urging the township to listen to their landowner partners, many of whom are sophisticated developers who have extensive experience developing communities, complete communities throughout the region. The landowners do truly want to work collaboratively with the township to build the compact, efficient, complete communities that are desperately needed. But we also want to avoid costly, time-consuming tribunal intervention. And simply pushing this matter off to the OLT will create risk for all parties involved, and it will, of course, cost the taxpayers. My clients would much prefer to work collaboratively in partnership with the township to develop policies and designations that will allow for the delivery of much-needed housing supply in an efficient, again, I repeat it, that's the language in the provincial policies, it has to be efficient, cost-effective, and at the same time, we would like to avoid the costs and risks associated with the lengthy OLT hearing. So we're here requesting that the township continue to meet with the landowners to work towards addressing these key concerns before OPA 63 is considered for approval by the region. And that concludes what I intended to say in terms of the delegation, subject to any questions you may have for myself or members of the Phelps team.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Members of the committee, any questions at this time? Pardon me? Yeah, we will. She's right here. Steve's our representative for the consulting group, so that's what I was mentioning before, but you want to hold your questions later, we might call you back up.
Sure.
That's all right, so.
Thank you very much.
I'm not seeing anybody put their hand up yet. Okay, so we have next item P 2023, Raymond Zimba. I hope I said that correctly, apologies if I didn't. Senior Planner, SGL Planning and Design, Inc., and has comments as well on Official Plan Amendment 63. And welcome, Raymond.
No.
Assuming you're Raymond, if you could just, for the record, just give your name and address as well.
Sorry, I was just speaking to him. Yeah, good evening, Chair and committee members. I'm Raymond Jemba from SGL Planning and Design, located at 1547 Bloor Street, West Toronto. Our team of consultant teams have actively participated in representing the Smithville Landowner Group over the last couple of years, providing comments that have been addressed and not addressed in OPA 63. And I'd like to thank township staff and their consultant teams for their work to date in advancing OPA 63. We're happy to see a number of the suggestions have been incorporated, but there are a few that have not been addressed, and we'd like to, as outlined in our March 2nd comment letter, and there are a number of concerns that have not been addressed. And the three major ones that I wanted to speak to are restoration areas, cost sharing, and servicing. With respect to restoration areas, we understand and support the goal of having a vibrant and enhancing the natural heritage system, but continue to take concern with the approach of establishing the recommended restoration area and potential restoration area. These two designations have the same function, but recommended restoration areas are mapped without a detailed analysis, whereas potential restorations are mapped schematically. We appreciate there has been some efforts to address these concerns through permitting refinements to the recommended restoration areas through environmental impact studies. However, this broad stroke approach of applying these boundaries, these unsubstantiated boundaries to these individual features in the recommended restoration areas and then requiring detailed studies is really a complicated process that will potentially cause delays. So we continue to recommend that recommended restoration areas should also be mapped schematically like potential restoration areas, and then have the features evaluated and determined at the time of an EIS. With respect to cost sharing, we previously provided a suggested cost sharing policy. This is a typical policy within municipalities for expansion areas, and it essentially sets up an agreement with a lawyer and an engineer that coordinates and keeps tracks of infrastructure and the implementation. We understand there is policies in OPA 63 that are intended to ensure collaboration with landowners for this, but we're concerned without a direct policy in place that these facilities and required facilities like parks and roads will not roll out in a timely manner, and there could be an unfair distribution of costs. A lot of work has gone into this plan, and the delivery of these facilities could be delayed. This policy really just provides the comfort of knowing the services will be delivered in a timely manner, fairly, with limited administration from the town, and is more of a final checks and balance. The last comment I really want to stress is the servicing strategy. As outlined in our commenting letter, the current servicing strategy is very prescriptive. It's reiterating the strategy within the water and wastewater master plan. And this approach doesn't necessarily provide a lot of flexibility when detailed studies come forward in the future, which may vary from the master servicing plan when they have that detailed blocks analysis. Our consultant team has already prepared an alternative servicing strategy, which was submitted, outlining a different strategy for the lands to the west along town line. And we also provided some minor suggested edits to OPA 63 to really support that and provide that flexibility that should a process strategy come forward that varies, it would not be hindered through required an amendment or doing lengthy studies. So with a significant push for delivering housing in a timely manner and getting shovels in the ground, we do recommend these policies be incorporated. Thank you for your time. There's been a number of positive changes, but again, we do want to just make sure we get this right, and as such, we recommend that the committee and council recommend, to work with the landowners group to resolve these concerns going forward.
Absolutely, thank you. Appreciate that. So we will move forward. I'm going to go to the next item, which is requests to address items on the agenda. And so at this point, I'll just read my piece, and then we'll start with the virtual members. If there's virtual members, then we'll come to gallery members. So at this point, under section 1013, 5 and 6, general rules, 1 hour in total shall be allocated for this section of the agenda, and each individual shall be only provided with 5 minutes to address their issue. Some exceptions apply. A response may not be provided, and the matter may be referred to staff. A person who wishes to discuss a planning application or a matter that can be appealed will be permitted to speak up to 10 minutes. So depending on which item on the agenda you speak to, there are some areas that you might be given a little extra time. So at this point, I'm gonna, I guess, go to Kevin and our IT guy just to see if anyone in the gallery there. For those who are participating virtually, you just gotta use if you're familiar with Zoom, you use the Zoom controls to raise your hand, and that tells staff here that you would like to speak. And or I don't see any phone numbers, so I don't have to give you that information for that. Not seeing or hearing anyone. I know there's a message in the Q&A, but whoever's put the message in Q&A, we cannot take messages from there because it can't be sent publicly into public record that way. So I just see a little indicator here, but we won't open that. So whoever put the message in there, if it's something that you want discussed, you do need to put your hand up and speak to it. Okay, at this point, I can always come back if people change. We'll go to the gallery we have in person here. Any members of the gallery wishing to address any items on tonight's agenda? Not seeing or hearing any. Perfect, okay. And then, again, I don't see anybody on the virtual side of things. So we're going to move forward. We have no consent agenda items. We have no communications, and so now that brings us to section 10.1, item P2123. It's a recommendation report, PD 17-2023. Proposed modifications to official plan amendment 62 and 63 prior to regional council consideration. And I'll read the recommendation. That the recommendation report PD 17-2023 regarding proposed modifications to the official plan amendment 62 and 63 prior to regional council consideration dated March 6, 2023 be received. And that the proposed modifications to the official plan amendment 62 and 63 as found at attachment 2 to this report, and which incorporate both the regional staff and township staff and consultant proposed modifications in one amending document, be endorsed by the Township Planning, Building, Environmental Committee and Council as the township supported modifications for the region to make to the adopted OPA 62 and 63 as part of the final approval, and that the Township Council endorsement of the modifications to be forwarded to the regional staff prior to presentation of the official plan amendment 62 and 63 as modified to regional council for adoption. So I'm going to need a mover and a seconder. I got Councilor Braderick and Councilor Trombetta. So at this point, the floor is open. Any questions? Actually, I'll go to, I guess, our director first to comment.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I'll speak to 4 different items, and that might help assist a little bit with some of the discussion or some of the questioning. But first, just to add to the record, if I could, Mr. Chair, there was an item of correspondence that was emailed today, and I believe all of the councillors received it by email directly from Linda Sivier. Yes. But if you don't mind, I'll read it into the record. That way the public also hears it. So it's a request for inclusion in the March 6 Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. Proposed modifications to official plan amendment 62 and 63. Dear members of West Lincoln Council, we wish to express support for the amendments to OPA 62 and 63 as outlined in PD 17-2023 to be presented by West Lincoln's Planning Department at this evening's meeting of the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee. We recognize the complexity of urban expansion and development. We appreciate the Planning Department's efforts to facilitate new development while addressing concerns of landowners, developers, and citizens. Specifically, we support amendments to OPA 63 that will allow for minor modifications to the designated natural heritage systems and restoration areas to facilitate development that do not change the goals already established, namely that a targeted 30% of areas within the new urban boundary lands be established and maintained as natural heritage systems. We would appreciate an opportunity to address any further proposed modifications to OPA 62 and 63 that may arise. Sincerely, Richard and Linda Sivier, Scott Antonitis, on behalf of Community for Responsible Growth - West Lincoln. So that was one item, Mr. Chair. The other one, just to speak to that has been mentioned already, cost sharing and the draft policy for cost sharing. That has been received. I acknowledge receipt, and it's been referred to Township Legal Counsel for guidance in terms of how to incorporate that into the amending documents. And I know our legal counsel, Mr. Richardson, is in discussions with legal counsel for the landowners group, Helen Mahalady, or however you say her name, excuse me. They're in discussions, and I anticipate some sort of response back shortly, but I don't have it as of tonight. But okay. It is in works, and it is acknowledged and will be dealt with properly. The third thing, sorry, I wanted to speak to just really quickly is a timing item. The servicing strategy work that has been referred to a couple of times tonight. Those master servicing plans are being properly reviewed by our public works staff thoroughly and will be presented through our consulting team to Public Works Committee on the 20th. I think it's the 20th of this month. So that is to come. You guys will see those in fulsome detail at Public Works Committee, and a discussion that night around some of the concerns heard here might be appropriate. And finally, I just want to put on the record that staff will continue and are committed to continue to work with the landowners to address concerns that might still need some further massaging. I have said repeatedly to our consulting team, and I'll say it to anybody that talks to me Our goal is to find a made in West Lincoln solution. Like Jennifer Meter mentioned, we'd like to avoid OLT hearings that are very costly, but we're going to do it right. We're going to do it the way that benefits West Lincoln and our residents, as well as the development community. So that's the key, is to try and find the right balance between the interests of all the parties and to do it in a West Lincoln style. And I'm committed to speaking to anybody and seeing if we can find further solutions in that regard.
Appreciate
So,
that information.
Just to put that on the table, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you. So I'll go to members of the committee. I got Councillor Trombetta. No, so far you're first up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Director of Planning. You did take one question I had out that I was blessed by a little bit of steam that I had processing in my mind. The one issue I do have is the cost sharing component that is not in, let's just say. I feel real strongly that there should be a cost sharing component, and I hope legal does get back and comes up with something. I do think it is unjust if services are brought in by one and then other people are tapping in for free. So hopefully they do find some ground on that, and that's some cost that could be attained, and I wish, I guess we're gonna have to wait. And when will there be an answer on that? That's my question instead of a comments that I'm making, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll speak to legal tomorrow and see if we can't have something perhaps that can come to Public Works Committee, because most of it will be tied to the ability to put servicing in the ground. So if we can have that tied into the presentations on the 20th, probably makes some sense. Just the one issue, there's no question front-ending of agreements will have to be, or front-ending agreements will have to be done in order to put some of the pipes in the ground that are necessary, because we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of infrastructure. This is no small effort. Having said that, though, there in my mind is no reason anybody should get a free ride. Everyone should pay their way, and the development community who's going to benefit should be leading that charge. The one complication that we're being thorough about, and this is no surprise to anybody, the latest being Bill 23, but there's been a lot of changes to development charges since we entered the agreements in 2019 to get this work done. Staff are trying to be thorough and comprehensive and make sure that all of the study work that the development community has paid for to date is also able to be recouped through that work and the front-ending agreements and the development charge collection at the time of building permits and all of that. And there is some concern that the ability to collect the study requirements and the study costs perhaps have been dropped through a lot of the changes. So we're trying to be thorough to make sure that we are putting together the right package to cover all of the ways to recoup the monies, and that's the reason for the delay, sir.
Thank you.
Just one more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to kind of continue, I know you said hundreds of thousands, but I think it's millions of dollars that is in costs. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I think there's just a comment there. So once it does come back us on the 20th, then once that you report from then we send our report after on the 20th is the idea? Well,
there's sort of, Mr. Weaver can probably speak to this far better than I can, or Richard Van de Zand. There's the EA process that will sort of commence with the presentation on the 20th, and then there's the modification piece that has to go to the region for approval. So the two are related, but there's kind of two processes to sort of finish off the final steps.
Okay.
And as I say, Steve and Richard can speak to them.
So
much
just
better.
to you, Mr. Chair, that, I do find that these hundreds of $1 million upfront costs, and I said someone just back-ending and tapping in for free is nothing that I'd like to see, especially with the escalating costs in this economy, I guess, today, and as we get further. So I hope we can find some ground in fixing that problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely agree. Councillor Chichok?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the changes that are being proposed here, which none of which are absolutely upsetting the apple cart that's been gone through in the past 5-6 years, if we chose not to do it, the region could in fact do it themselves, could they not? Mr. Director, through you, Mr. Chair.
Dave's been here 3 weeks, I guess, and I'm feeling that he's got a better handle on some of the details. So if we start diving in, I'll be deflecting, believe me.
I promise I won't go too deep.
As far as the process, as I understand it, certainly when the region's official plan was granted approval on November 4th, it was with 44 amendments or whatever the number was, basically imposed on the region by the province. I think there was some dialogue and discussion that occurred, but there was really no chance for regional council to deliberate. The region's taken a totally different approach and is working with the lower tier to attempt to achieve changes that improve clarity and the whole bit. So they haven't taken the provincial approach, but they could.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There's the point.
they could if they wanted to. I don't think they will.
But the fact, Mr. Chair, through you, that we have these proposals, the region is likely to agree to having them inserted into the already approved plan that is before them. Is that correct?
Certainly, we're working with regional staff. We hope regional council will listen to regional staff and implement at that level, but that's to be determined yet. So.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair, I understand that the developers are a little concerned, but we have mimicked a number of the planning processes here in Niagara and in the little town of Smithville in a way that I believe is very sophisticated, and I take somewhat of an offense to the fact that we haven't. Did we not hire a group of consultants that are very familiar with development in other areas of Ontario, and have they not been working with us for the past 6 years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the consulting teams were hired in 2019 and have worked extensively across Ontario. The subwatershed study basis for our work is, I would say, leading edge across Ontario, and based on policy, provincial policy guidance that was put in place by the previous provincial government. You know, we've followed the instructions of Places to Grow and PPS and implemented.
And Bill 23 and anything else that's come along
Yeah.
behind it to bite us.
Forgive me for a second, but some of the latest changes have sort of undone some of the sophistication of some of the planning requirements, but we've done the thorough job required anyway, so that it's comprehensive, it looks at the whole of the study area and doesn't just sort of piecemeal the planning, so.
So, Mr. Chair, through you, if block planning and cost sharing and developers groups are out there and are pretty frigging normal out there for all other municipalities that have undergone a larger growth than what we might be facing, I would think that our ability to get from those other municipalities the kind of preparation work that we have to put into place through our legal advisors to ensure that we are not going to handle or allow for people to sneak in the back doors. And I'm sure that our developers group has their own cost-sharing agreement tied up in their own group, which has nothing to do with us. But with anything to do with anything with the municipality, sorry for that double, we are going directly to our lawyers, who will speak with Helen Mahaliti, and who is probably, on the developer side, a very familiar face in all the developers groups' agreements. And we will be talking with our lawyers through to Mrs. Mahaliti and getting the appropriate language that will satisfy the developers. Is that not our goal?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start. Dave might have some comments as well, but yeah, the effort that staff have put into this and the ongoing efforts that we're putting into it right now are to make sure that we are prepared and ready to go. And the front-ending agreement is a key piece of all of that. And we're working with regional staff right now. There's a front-ending agreement that is close to being signed. Last I heard, it wasn't signed yet, but close to being signed for a 400-millimeter pipe along Spring Creek Road that Mars is working with the region to sign. That'll be a template agreement for us to use at the township level following its signing. And, you know, the policy piece that we'll try and have a discussion about on the 20th and whatever else around ensuring that we're ready from a cost and front-ending point of view are pieces of the puzzle. Dave is working on block plan terms of reference so that they're up and ready to be running. We have some steps to do there, but we should be ready to go. I think kind of April-ish timeframe is our goal there as well. The thing perhaps to add, if I can, developers in West Lincoln are not used to working together. Those times have to end, and these developers need to start working together with their neighbors and others who have expertise and capacity to help guide us. We'll get further working together than we will fighting. And so, you know, let's put our shoulders together, not just the town and one developer, but the town and all developers at the same time. That's number one. And number two, these are big projects and big dollars, even if I got them wrong. But the reality is that we have to work as a unified front in order to make a lot of this happen. But it's going to happen in a phased fashion regardless. And unfortunately, the phasing concepts means that somebody starts, somebody finishes, and the time frame is 30 years. So it's a long window to have to wait for some of these developments to take place. But Baker Road will have to undergo a substantial upgrades at some point. The water service will have to undergo substantial updates. And the region has these timed in their development charges, and at certain points we're not going to be able to grow until that infrastructure is put in the ground. The pumping station here on St. Catherine Street will have to have some major upgrades as well. So all of the phasing is kind of tied to the servicing. It's all interlocked and it has to unfold in that fashion. So that's part of the frustration, I know, is everybody'd like to have shovel in the ground tomorrow. But that's not the way Smithville wants it done either. We want it done in a slow, steady, and sustained way. So it's important for our community not to have the entire town ripped up at the same time.
And as we progress, Mr. Chairman, through this system, through the next number of months, you've already mentioned amount of work that has to be done in order to move forward yet again. But all of the steps that we are taking seem to me, in what I've heard before, that these are the appropriate steps and that we are taking them carefully so as not to make issues and to have the right agreements in place, and that the developers have that same time to put those right agreements in place within their developers group. And while we can't do best efforts but to put that into an agreement, that is the partnership between a township and a developers group will be the best we can do to move this project forward, have the appropriate funding, and to let the developers collect from one another. Is that right?
That is correct. The other piece that we haven't really spoken about is development charges. We have to open up the background study and add a number of these costs that you'll see in the master servicing plans into the development study so that we can collect the money to help offset the costs the developers are front-ending as well. So yeah, there's a number of different moving pieces, and we're kind of on top of all of it. So
I just wanted to make sure I still had my eye on the right ball. Thank you very much for answering those questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So I have Mayor Gannon, and then I have Councillor Rayner.
And so thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, my question is not nearly as sophisticated as Councillor Chichok. I actually had a conversation with a resident today about the issue of growth. So I really, this is just a clarification, Mr. Director, through you, Mr. Chair. The resident that I spoke with today was most upset that we could potentially be just exploding in terms of growth the way they have seen other communities. So on behalf of that resident, who I tried to reassure this was a long-term process, I've also heard a couple of presenters tonight sort of allude to the fact that this current government, provincial government, is looking to have a lot of homes built very quickly. And we are not, I think, engaged in that at this point in time. So we know we have building to happen inside the current urban boundary. Do you have a notion in your educated head about how many years it might take until we are actually going to see some of this growth start in the urban boundary expansion? Are we looking at 1 year, 5 years? Any guess in between, just so that residents are not going to be perhaps listening into this meeting and suddenly thinking that not only do we have all the things currently ongoing inside town, but we have more that's suddenly going to come at us. So,
yes, Through you, Mr. Chair, a lot of this is tied to the developers and the timing of applications, obviously, but I know Dave and team have already met with developers representing phase number 1. I forget if it's 1A or 1B or one of the phases in the very northwest corner, and they're itching to go. So, but that's a block plan. So the block plans have to get approved, and that looks in more depth at servicing and land use and some of the features on the ground like karst and all of those things, just to make sure as you sort of start drilling down in the planning layers that things are more accurately refined and that process. I've never been through one, but it's likely going to take quite a long time. I don't know, we're talking half a year or more, I would bet, by the time we get a draft plan reviewed.
Probably a year.
Yeah. So, yeah, Dave's saying even a year to 2 possibly. So, and then the subdivision applications would have to come after that.
So it's a long process. I
It
think we,
is.
as a committee, have a fairly decent understanding, just watching what's happened in the rest of our town, to know that that's a long period of time. But I think residents get a little bit worried sometimes about, just what is going to come at us. When they see, for example, what's happened in Binbrook, they don't have a sense of how many years that was in the works before they suddenly started to see all of those houses. So I just am hoping that we're able to reassure people that it's not going to be an overnight process, that it is a long thing, and that we're doing it carefully. So thank you for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just as an example, one of the tables that will be in one of these documents, I would assume it's in OPA 63, but I can't say with certainty right now, is a table of projected growth. And we're talking about 3,000 people every 5 years kind of deal. So it's meant to be kind of slow and steady, but it's a higher pace than we're doing right now. It's been very quiet the last couple of years, but once we get going, then there'll be shovels in the ground in certain areas pretty considerably, but it's not going to be here, there, and all over the place.
But even that number is a really good guideline, I think, just for people to have an idea about what's coming. And I think part of that is just really having an understanding of the fact that that planning process does take time, and but the growth is going to happen. But thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Treble, you're very reassuring when you said it's going to be done in the Made in West Lincoln solution. That's very important to me. As everybody knows, I'm for agriculture, not for destroying it. So this is not in my best light to be entertained tonight. However, I realize that progress has to be made, but we have to do it very carefully, very cautiously, and minimize the amount of land that's being lost. I was quite nervous, nothing personal. Mr. Raymond Zimba made a presentation. He said he was from Toronto. I worked a number of years in Toronto in the 70s down the QEW. There were horse farms on either side. I worked there in the 90s. There was a lot less. And now when you go through, there's nothing. So I really don't want Mr. Zimba's direction that they take in Toronto about taking every piece of land and making it into a metropolis and come here and do that to an agricultural township of West Lincoln. That's not really what I want to see. Brian is very correct in the sense, let's do it properly, let's do it slowly, but let's do it in a way that we don't affect the heritage that we have in this town. Madam Mayor mentioned that she had talked about the development that happened in Binbrook. Having knocked on just about all the doors in my ward last fall in the election, I was quite surprised but pleased. There was a considerable number of new residents in Ward 1. And the vast majority, one was from Brampton, one was from Hamilton, the rest were all from Binbrook that wanted to get away from that rat race and come to a place where they could actually hear the wind blow, hear the birds tweet, and actually look around and see some land. So even very close, and Hamilton is destroying farmland like crazy in Binbrook for some unknown reason. They're making it into another city. But that is actually moving people away from it because they don't really like it. And they want to come to an area that's peaceful and quiet, and a tremendous number, the biggest turnout I've ever seen all the years I've knocked on doors, was the last term, the last 4 years. There's been a big turnaround from people from Binbrook. Now, the last thing I want to mention is this kind of a play on words to the chair, to the director of Planning. This new amendment, 62 and 63, we initially approved, I believe, 540 hectares of land last year. Was that not correct, Mr. Treble? I believe it was July the 18th. We firmed that up. Is that not correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that sounds correct. I know that was one of the slides in Steve's PowerPoint presentation. 540 hectares was in official plan amendment number 62, approved on July 18th. That's correct.
Then it went to the region, and that was approved on August the 11th? Is that not, or was
No.
there something else August that happened?
There's two.
There was two of them that went, one went in
Yeah.
July, one went in August?
So, Mr. Chair, through you, there's two amendments. OPA 6, in simple terms, OPA 62 is really drawing the boundary, and that was approved in July. And then the policy, the detail that Steve went through tonight, most of that is in 63. The way it's implemented, as Steve referred to it as a secondary plan. So we've got the boundary in 62, the policy in 63. Those are both sitting at regional staff. The best guess is that Regional Planning Committee will deal with them on April the 5th. And then Regional Council would be the Thursday following that, I think. So April 13th or something like that, I think, would be Regional Council. So that's the timeline as of right now for the region.
Through the chair to Mr. Treble, I thought we had a timeline last year to get this ironed out, settled, go to the region. They had a timeline, I thought it was the end of November or December, and it had to be at the province within a certain period of time because they had to sign off on it. Was there not a stepping stone procedure that we had to go through in order to get this whole thing confirmed? We had to wait to see if the region were pleased with what we'd done, and then if the region approved it, it had to go to the province, and we had to see if the province approved it. Was that not correct, Mr. Treble?
Yeah, there were a number of steps. Dave and I are just confirming. I have in my head that the region's plan had to be on the minister's desk on July the 1st. I think that was the date, and it got approved on November the 4th. And so we had to have a recommendation to the region in terms of what we wanted Smithville to look like before the region took their document to the minister. And so, yeah, there was a bit of a hurry up at the start. And then as the region landed on what they recommended to the minister, then we could land on what made sense to us. So the minister's desk was July the 1st, and then we did our documents on the July the 18th and August the 11th after it had landed there, because we knew what the region had done by that point.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Brian. So it was approved then at that time by the region, and the province also approved it, correct?
The province hasn't approved our urban the province has approved the region's plan, which includes our urban boundary.
Correct.
But the detail in 63 is not provincially approved, just the boundary.
Okay, again, through the planner to Mr. Treble, then this official plan amendment is basically, it's almost being in English class in high school or whatever, and the way you phrased this sentence didn't look good, so they scratched it out and they reworded it below. Is that almost, a lot of these that Mr. Weaver presented tonight were deletions of basically exactly what was said below, but they just changed the words in how they wanted to say it. Is that not correct? Is that like,
It's
that, they just didn't like the sound of it, but they basically said the same thing?
through you, Mr. Chair. Some of it is a little more complicated than that, but generally it's improvements to the clarity of the language, which down the road will help everyone understand exactly what the intent is, and we don't get caught up in interpretations and disagreements down the road. So, multiple eyes looking at it have, I think, probably strengthened the language and made it clearer. And there's probably a couple of places, Steve could probably get into a lot more detail, but a couple of places where I would say that we've probably had to change the language given the language of provincial policy or the regional plan or whatever for consistency as well. So it's not just changing words around for the fun of it. It's a little more complicated than that.
All right, just one final thing, Mr. Chair. I was leading into that because to me it was almost a play on words. We keep mentioning landowners. But these people that are involved in this are landowners in the sense that they own the land, but they have no love or affiliation to agriculture. They couldn't wait to see the shovel go on
So,
this.
Councillor,
I think the name needs to be changed to speculator because they are not land lovers.
All
They
right,
don't
so
like
Counselor-
the land, they want to make money on it and move on.
Counselor, okay, you got your message across.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, you got the point. I'm gonna go to Counselor Broderick. Oh, and then I'll come back to Counselor.
Thank you, Chair. So most of my questions were already answered by some of my colleagues around this horseshoe, but I have a couple of lingering ones, and I believe through you to our presenter, Mr. Weaver. As I hear, some of the differing opinions between what the presentation and what our proposed policy modifications are, and the landowners group is the designated use of land. So I just wanted a little bit of clarification on a couple of points in your presentation, Mr. Weaver, if you wouldn't mind. The one in regards to the road allowance. We had originally had just a very general statement, and I'm understanding, and if you can confirm for me, that we broadened that explanation of what the minimum right-of-way widths could be for certain types of roads. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee member, that's correct. We originally just had a 20-meter minimum right-of-way width identified for any roads that would be in the township's jurisdiction as the minimum. But as we know, there are different volumes of traffic that different roads may carry, and different amounts of infrastructure and sidewalk requirements and boulevard requirements and all the rest of it influence the ultimate right-of-way width. But the other presenters that spoke tonight were seeking, I believe, is for the typical local subdivision street, rather than a minimum of 20 meters, that there would be, say, an 18-meter right-of-way width requirement or some other alternatives offered. And those were considered through the Transportation Master Plan process. That was reviewed by your works staff in detail, and the outcome of that was that there was a preference at the staff level, or direction from the staff level, to stay at minimum of 20 meters rather than adding in to the policy in 18 meters. But the policy does give developers and landowners the opportunity to bring forward proposals for reduced right-of-way widths, and for council to consider those with input from staff. So it's not built into the policy, it's not built into the Transportation Master Plan to permit less than 20 meters, but if that proposal was made in the future with appropriate justification, that could be considered by this committee in the future.
So because of that, because of the, we have the right to still change the width without amending this policy. Can you tell us what is the reason why we are so specific on those types of roads, and why you had added that in?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it relates to a couple of things. In order to secure those road allowances as a development requirement, as the lands are developed, you do have to have the right-of-way widths prescribed in your OP, in your official plan. And specifically when there's a site plan process and the township wants to require a road widening to achieve the design, the desired right-of-way width, the Planning Act states that the municipality has to identify those right-of-way widths in the OP. So it is important to have them specifically identified as a basis for justifying the acquisition of the land for those roads.
So this helps protect us as a municipality when we're creating our transportation master plan?
Exactly. It provides the basis for the township to acquire the necessary road allowances to ensure there's adequate land for new roads and for widening of existing roads.
And one more question.
So actually, I think our director wanted to chime in on that topic, and then you can go to your last question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No worries. The other piece, in addition to what Steve has said, is that our public works staff have been thinking through what services will be under the ground, and obviously there's distance requirements between water pipes and sewer pipes and all of that stuff, and in some road allowances there'll be both township water and sewer pipes and regional force main pipes and stuff like that. So obviously the more infrastructure underground, the more we need to make sure we have road width for that. So that's another piece that you don't necessarily see, but what's going on underground is important too.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
So one other question through you, Chair, to Mr. Weaver. and of course our director, if he'd like to chime in. I had heard another kind of theme in regards to the designation of the use of the land, and talking about that 30% natural heritage system. And there was, I believe, one of the later presenters had mentioned that that was not grounded in science. If you could expand a little bit on where that 30% number comes from. Is it provincial? Is it regional? Is it from our conservation authority? Did you dream it up one night? Where does it come from?
Great question, and through you, Mr. Chair. The number was studied through the sub-watershed study. So one of the consulting teams, Wood, or which is now WSP, led that team, and through field work and analysis of mapping information and available natural heritage system data, they reviewed what is on the landscape, what's readily identifiable as any feature that could accommodate ecological functions, and contribute to things like tree canopy cover and ensure that wetlands are adequately buffered and protected and those sorts of things, as well as watercourse corridors, floodplains, valley lands, all of those different features. So that collection of information was put together and put on a series of maps, and those maps were used throughout the process over the last number of years and reviewed with the public and with the development community and with the NPCA and the region, and a final recommendation was made on this natural heritage system. The PPS provides the basis for designating a natural heritage system. It's a requirement of the PPS for municipalities to do so. The 30% target is not in the PPS or the GROW plan, but it is in your existing official plan. And your existing official plan refers to it in the context of a township-wide scale, but limited to woodlots and wetlands. And so, as I identified in the presentation, there are not sufficient woodlands and wetlands existing in the Smithville urban area or its expansion area to achieve 30% of the land as woodland and wetland. So we had to come up with a way through the sub-watershed study, as per that official plan policy, to figure out a more flexible way to achieve a natural cover target. And so the 30% natural cover target in Smithville, unlike the rest of the township, includes a whole host of other features to get to that 30% target, contributing to the township-wide target of 30% for woodlands and wetlands. So that's a bit of a simplified, background or rationale for the 30%, but there's definitely more detail to that and some of the science behind it in the sub-watershed study report, which is quite extensive.
Well, it sounds like a significant Made in West Lincoln target. And that's all my questions. Thank you.
No problem. I got Councillor Chichok for a second time, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I forgot a couple of things. They were on the other page. But speaking of the natural heritage system, through you, Mr. Chair, to either our director or to Mr. Weaver, I don't want people to be mistaken, or I don't want to be mistaken in understanding a natural heritage system. It is not necessarily public open space where kids will play. It may be connected through some of those things, but it's a natural recharge area. It's a green space for flora and fauna to grow, and it is not necessarily friendly places for people to have picnics or intrude. Am I correct?
Let me turn this on. Can you hear me? Sorry. Through the chair to the councillor, you're correct. I mean, I think Steve can speak to the fact that we were trying to be more flexible in expanding the types of open space, natural areas that can be included in the 30% coverage. Stormwater management facilities, different things like that, but they're not where you necessarily go to play. Woodlots and wetlands, et cetera, as well, but they're all included in the coverage. So, yeah, they're not neighborhood parks for sure.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we still understood that in the development of this new lands, we would still need parks and baseball diamonds, which West Lincoln certainly has taken care of with Leisureplex. We have an abundance of land there that can be used for additional sports fields as we mature or grow. So we do plan, I think, sometimes, unbeknownst to our own unsophistication, to be able to provide for future residents of this community. Thank you. My next question was, given the mayor's question about timing and the extent of time before we would actually put shovels to ground, that seems to be able to give us enough time to be able to look at the servicing plans and the appropriateness of costing and the front-ending agreements that might be required, will be required, and we will enter into, should we require. So our whole servicing plan is yet to come. It's coming forward to us right this month. And then we'll have time to develop those servicing plans in order to service adequately and to give the developers the kind of cost that it will take to put the pipes in the ground, et cetera. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I'm sitting here, I was just thinking, along the lines of your question, the swap, I'll call it, that got the lands around the Greek Community Center in play, that happened in 2015, and here we are today, 8 years later, and we're getting darn close to building permits, but we're still not there.
I was getting close to that question.
So it does take a long time to get the planning done. Now, there's a couple of complications there that we didn't foresee, that the master servicing plan should help us see and anticipate the next time round. But yeah, it takes several years to get through the planning stages.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the right-of-way, when I saw the different sizes of right-of-way that might be required, and thinking of us as a rural municipality where people are coming thinking they're still going to see birds and things and be able to walk on safe sidewalks, et cetera, that wider width of sidewalk will allow us for extra wide sidewalks that might include street furniture and things that are normal in other municipalities. Is that correct? So giving it up now might be a bit premature for us to suggest that we are ready to give up those right-of-ways?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think probably that's a good discussion to have at Public Works, because in the master transportation plan, there is detailed sort of cross-sections of the different road categories, and you'll be able to see the concepts in those drawings. So I don't mean not to answer it, but I think it's better deflected over to the 20th if possible.
I think, through you, Mr. Chair, to the director, what I'm saying is that some things are yet to be discussed, determined, and that we will look at those in the appropriate timeline. So you've answered that quite well. My last question for this turn, Mr. Chair, is if maybe Mr. Treble or Mr. Weaver or whoever can answer the differences between a block plan, because that's a much larger than perhaps a subdivision plan. And maybe we could talk a bit about the fact that those are not the same, are they?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the person probably most qualified to answer that, and it's a learning opportunity for all of us, is really Richard Van de Zand. Okay. And then Dave can certainly get into some detail around the detail he's been working on since he's been here in terms of pulling together a block plan in terms of reference for us. So.
Okay, so Richard, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you for the opportunity to help you out with the decision-making process. To you, Councillor Chichak, through the chair, the thought process of block plans is to look at the stages in a more detailed manner, but also to be encompassing a wider scope than just a single subdivision plan. The intent of the block plan and the related MESP, which is the Master Environmental Servicing Plan, would be to address a number of things, including servicing, land uses, cost sharing, also in terms of the opportunity to implement the cost sharing, not the cost sharing, but the cost sharing and the front-ending agreements that need to also be in place. So it will be a process that is new to the township, but is basically effective because we already have the secondary plan in place for the entire urban boundary expansion, but we are able to look at that, the servicing, the roads, as well as the natural heritage, as well as some of the details relating to land use and those agreements that need to be entered into for full development of the process in a smaller stage look at for each of the 4 stages. We can also divide them up into even smaller phases if there's not enough, how will I say it, interest in the whole block to proceed. And we can also divide it up into smaller blocks as well. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you. At this stage, I think that's appropriate. And what it does say is there's a far more comprehensive set of expectations from both sides when you move to a block plan rather than one subdivision, which could be anything from 5 houses to 500.
That's correct.
Thank you. And I'll leave it with that at this time. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem, thank you. Not seeing any of the members of the committee, I'll mention a couple of comments here. I truly embrace the Made for West Lincoln approach. I think we need everyone on board with this. I know the community itself, like West Lincoln, will not be the community that solves the housing crisis. You know, it's been around, there's many different components to the housing crisis, also related to employment and opportunities and everything else. But in one of the presentations that was presented, I know there was the concern of tribunals. And so, which I think is almost counterintuitive in itself, because that actually stalls the process, making it even longer process, and this growth actually becomes not so immediate as all these things happen. But my question to you, Mr. Director, is, so once this is all finalized, however it looks, right now with how the phasing is, if someone's in the later part of the phasing in, could they not go to the council of that day if they need to make adjustments or changes and still seek that opportunity, I guess is what I'm looking for? Because nothing that we're necessarily making a decision today or in this year is written in stone. And we've seen that with their own provincial government. They're playing fast and loose with the rule book themselves, rewriting as they go. So even whatever happens now or what happens in 4 years from now is irrelevant, considering it will probably change again down the future. Sorry, I keep hitting my mic here. And so again, I'm just looking for the clarity in terms of this is not something that once it's done, it can never be undone.
Through you, I'll start, and others might want to chime in, but you're correct. It's land use planning, so it's never carved in stone. It's always subject to review in usually a 5-year window type thing. And I think Steve even alluded earlier to the fact that some of the stuff will be reviewed as we go. It is complicated, though, when it comes to the phasing, because as I indicated earlier, it's tied to availability of servicing. And, just as an example, to take the north, there's certain servicing that's required to accommodate growth in the north, but different servicing that's required in order to accommodate growth in the south. So by investing in infrastructure to connect areas in the north with sewer and water service means there's still more millions of dollars to put servicing in on the south side. And if somebody at the end of the pipe wants to start, there's a lot of upfront costs to get the sewage and the water and that. Not to say it can't be done, because if we get stalled and we have to keep growing, then we'll have to look for alternate places and alternate people to sort of come on stream if there's a phase that's not happening and we need additional land and additional growth, then we'll look elsewhere at that point for sure. So yeah, as we go, it'll be a bit of a work in progress, trying to, keep things going and get the servicing in the right places at the right time, so.
Okay, perfect. Again, I just really wanted to get that out there because I think sometimes there could be the misinterpretation or misunderstanding that whatever we end up deciding can never be changed, and that's certainly not the case. And in the 4 years I had before this term of office, new rules were changing literally by the week, and they still are. So again, I don't think there's any concern to have here, and I think this approach is the safest approach, and it's probably the approach, the Made for West Lincoln approach, is truly what the residents in the community wants. And they're not looking to see mass developments crammed in. We want to see some green space that not necessarily is related to the parks and trails, but stuff that just has natural heritage, and so I fully endorse that. So At this point, not seeing any other questions or comments, I do have my mover and seconder already. So I'll give our clerk a minute here to bring up the vote. We'll see if it works. Sometimes the technology, we're still working through the kinks, so we'll has it come up on everybody's screen? Oh, here we go. Okay, perfect. And then for those in the gallery here, you should be able to see on the sides, it will reveal the vote and the outcome. And then I'm assuming at home, will they be able to see that at home as well? Okay, perfect. Perfect, so as you see that, that carries. So now we go to the next item on the agenda here, and it's item 2223. And I have Senior Planner Garrett Borma and Manager of Planning Dave Hayworth. Recommendation report PD 16 2023 zoning bylaw amendment, temporary use bylaw, Kelly and Redicop Garden Suite application file number 1601-01522. And the recommendation is that recommendation report PD 16 2023 regarding zoning bylaw amendment, temporary use bylaw, Kelly Redicop Garden Suite application file number 1601-01522, dated March 6, 2023, be received. And that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required. And that the application for a temporary use bylaw, file number 1601-01522, be approved and found within attachment 3, and that staff circulate the notice of decision in accordance with the Planning Act. And, almost there. Okay, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to enter into a temporary use agreement with the owners and applicants. So I need a mover. I got Councillor Chichak and I have Councillor Braderick. Any questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. I'll go to our deputy clerk for the question here for the vote. And that carries. Excellent. So now we're on to item 10.3, which is item number PD 2323. Senior Planner Garrett Borma, Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, and Manager of Planning Dave Hayworth, and its recommendation report PD 11-2023 at 197 Griffin Street application for zoning amendment, owner Christoph Arnold, agent MPG Planning Solutions, and its file number 1601-00522. And the recommendation is that recommendation report PD 11-2023 regarding 197 Griffin Street application for zoning amendment, owner Christoph Arnold, agent MPG Planning Solutions, file number 1601-00522, dated March 6, 2023, be received. And that section 3417 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required, and that the application for zoning bylaw amendment 1601-00522 be approved as found in attachment 5, and that staff circulate notice of decision in accordance with the Planning Act. So I need a mover and second. I got Mayor Ganan and I have Councillor Chichak. Any questions or comments? Not seeing or hearing any. I'll go to our deputy clerk for the question, or for the vote, I mean. And that carries. So now we're moving forward to item P2423. And that's recommendation report PD 07-2023, and it's a bylaw enforcement and land use planning update, Grimsby Air Park, and there's a recommendation. That recommendation report PD 07-2023 regarding bylaw enforcement and land use planning update, Grimsby Air Park, dated March 6, 2023, be received. And that staff continue to brief committee and council as required, and to offer facilitation services to local residents who remain concerned, including the West Lincoln residents who abut the air park. This could include contacting Transport Canada as required. So I need a mover and seconder for that one. Councillor Trebetta and Councillor Braderick, and then I have Councillor Trebetta up for question here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know this is separate through you, Mr. Chair, to Director of Planning. I think back before I wanted Highway 20 Road Airport also added into this. Can it be added?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can, I'm still trying to get answers to some of the 20 Road stuff, so I wanted to bring this one forward to
Which I'm happy
speak to
with.
it. Because Transport Canada has been very actively involved, but a slightly different way. So I'm still working on 20 Road stuff to provide any sort of public comment that I can, because I know there are concerns there as well, but I wasn't ready tonight, so this was just the one-off for now.
Okay. I'm glad something has came back, and obviously good correspondence to the residents. Have they still been, I haven't heard something as of late, but has there still been some ongoing concerns? I don't know if, maybe the mayor would know, because I haven't heard, I guess, within the past couple of months or so, I haven't heard something, so unless something has arose recently. Madam Mayor, maybe if you can?
So the residents have been back in, and I've had a couple of phone calls recently.
Okay.
So it's an ongoing issue. So I was actually quite happy that, you know, through what we were able to do for the residents was resend the information package to Dean Allison's office, and got reassurance that it did get there.
Okay.
But actually, it's been Mr. Treble who's done a lot of digging through old contacts that he had, getting newer, updated contacts, and he was able to follow up on this on behalf of the residents.
Okay.
So they still have some concerns, obviously, but at least they've been addressed at this point in time.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Treble, I think.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess, just to sort of clarify, as I understand it, the first effort or the first point of contact for the residents is supposed to be to some sort of a committee that the management company of the airport has set up. I sense that the community's not necessarily happy with that. And that's when Transport Canada staff said specifically, then there is the complaint mechanism directly to Transport Canada, which is an attachment here and is a link. So, and I think we're going to try and get that link on our website, I believe, so that it's accessible to the public. So the goal with that is it's kind of a two-step process. Try with the local air park facility operators, managers, whatever the term is first. If that fails, Transport Canada is ready to go, and I was quite impressed. They knew their stuff.
Okay.
They've been on site, they've met with people, and they were they were accurate with what they were telling me. It wasn't like they were sitting in Ottawa conveying something about a place they'd never been to. These people had been on site.
Just to follow up, Mr. Chair, I know previously I had some concerns with this, and obviously the residents did reach out about some information that was prior given to the previous mayor, and I guess, was there any that there was not aware of? There was I guess, a stick, a USB stick floating around, and it's...
So when, we don't know where that one is.
Correct.
But when the residents did come to meet with me, they did provide another one.
Okay, good,
Which I gave
good.
directly to Mr. Treble that he has been able to work with
Okay.
and use, so.
And staff do now have a file with this
Excellent.
complaint record in it and the
Excellent.
USB stick.
Okay, thank you. That gave a...
Okay, Councillor Rayner?
Thank you. Through to Mr. Treble, reiterating much of what Councillor Trombetta said, I also have not heard anything since late last fall. But that doesn't mean it hasn't, and the mayor said that there's getting the complaints. You said there is a committee that they're supposed to go through first at the airport. Am I reading this correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I only know about this committee through Transport Canada. It sounds like it was kind of set up at the direction of Transport Canada, so I'm assuming that whoever the members are is regulated or approved that way. It's not us, it's not our committee.
But it is by the airport.
That's my understanding, yes.
Through the chair to Mr. Treble, then, is the same situation not existing then on 20 Road?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think the complaints are as extensive, but I'm still trying to confirm exactly what has happened there. So I'll report back further on that one. I'm not aware of a committee in that case, but I could be wrong.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair to Mr. Treble, with regards to the letter going to Mr. Allison, have we heard anything with regards to that? You said there was
Well, I
letter
believe
forwarded?
The mayor had confirmed that there was confirmation of receipt. So I don't know if the mayor maybe you can just confirm, was it you that received the confirmation receipt? Was
We
it just
did. We
that?
received confirmation of receipt of the information. In fact, we asked for that this
Okay.
time to make sure that it did. So it went electronically, and it also went in the mail, the actual mail, so that it was received in 2 formats.
Okay, but there was no like rebuttal, it was just more like, hey, we received it.
It was just simply
So-
passing on this, it was quite a large information package that the residents and the committee that have been working together supplied.
Okay.
And so we now know that all of that information went in 2 different ways to Mr. Allison's office, so that, you know, there was nothing that could go wrong in
all of our
terms of
bases
making sure
covered.
that they had that, so.
Okay.
And we did ask for a receipt, you know, of having
Submission.
received all of that information, and that also came, so.
Perfect, thank you.
Right, just a further comment. As much as that is good and everything's done and you got the paperwork, unfortunately, Mr. Allison is on the wrong side of the majority, and it makes it a lot more difficult for him to get anything done, I'm sure, when you've got to go through it the hard way. We can be optimistic about this, but that's going to be, to me, a hard go. But anyways, any further information, Mr. Trouble, can you please bring it to our attention and further
That's-
back with regards to 20 Road?
Yeah, that's what the director had already mentioned that he would do.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess, so, during our pre-agenda, one of the things that came up was about helping, how do we help get some of this information out there, more accessible, as we have on our website, and utilizing our website. I thought would be a really good place for us to be able to have a little section regarding this. So if you get a resident reach out to you, making the complaint portion on Transport Canada more accessible was something that could be done. So at this point, I would mention to our CEO, if she could go forward with that, that'd be great, because I think anything we could do to be able to pass that on. And for example, just one quick example, like I know when we had the police here and they gave us an example of how you can report traffic violators, that was one of that resource came out of that conversation, and as a result, it's one of the easiest resources we have when a resident comes forward. I'm like, okay, listen, here's the link, here's some other information, and when we can steer them to the website and they can get, because half the time people just don't know where to go and how accessible that information is. So that'd be my answer. So I got the CO, and then I'll come back to you.
So thank you for bringing that up, Chair. I was chatted last week with staff, and we're just trying to find the appropriate place, and it might just go under report of concern as another item.
Okay,
But we
perfect.
will, as soon as we identify it, I'll make sure that I send the information out to council.
That'd be great. Councillor Trombetta again.
I'd like to see that on the website through you, Mr. Chair and Madam CAO, but I know this is going to be more talks that we can do, but is there a way in the future maybe we can clip this portion of the meeting and attach it to that, to those things in the later? I know this is real preliminary, but when residents do ask us, if they go to the website, they see that clip of what the mayor said and what Mr. Treble said and what we said here, it does help a lot, because there's some stuff we try to relay back to the residents, and we could say go to the video, but for someone to scroll on YouTube, we've had 5-6 hour meetings, try to get your finger there to the right point is almost next to impossible.
And if
but-
it's 2 years later, you got about 300 videos to go.
Correct. So if there's something in the future, we can look at council, maybe to clip this portion of the meeting, to put it to that would look, I'm just saying for transparency, it's a little easier, I think.
We got the mayor here.
So I'm not sure about that aspect of doing that, and that might be a really good idea. But what I did do after conversation with Mr. Treble and knowing it was coming on the agenda was reach out to the people who came to visit the office, both Mr. Stevenson and also the Smiths, just to let them know that Mr. Treble had followed up, and there was a report coming tonight, and addressed them as to how to find it on the agenda so that they would be able to read the report themselves. So we're kind of doing our best to connect those dots in spite of not having the technology to do exactly what you're looking for.
We do have it, but it's a little bit more work. You just have to kind of record that session, record that,
it, yeah.
and attach it. But I'd like to see that maybe in the future, because it would help a lot of questions, and they can see that section going with the website. But that's for future talks. Thank you.
I got our CO for
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Trombetta. I like the way you think. I don't know yet if we're there, but we do often try to find the right hour and minute, and if you get questions, we can sort of put that out there so you don't have to look that hard. Okay?
There is a way actually to, through YouTube, I'm sure our communications officer could figure that out, where you can literally grab it right from the minute and it falls into the URL extension. So I'm sure Beth probably knows better than me, but it is doable. So, okay, so at that point, I don't see, or at this point, sorry, I don't see anybody else, so I'll go to our deputy.
Sorry.
Sorry, my apologies.
No, Mr. Chair, I don't want to drag things out. I just wanted to say that I can confirm that we emailed the report as well to Mr. Greg Middleton.
Okay, perfect.
Just one more, I was just in conversation with the clerk here to the side here, but can we attach the minutes to that? Would it be possible to attach the minutes? Just what, or is it upon your approval, Madam CAO? We'll do the minutes?
I'm just thinking that when it's really interesting when you look at a web map and a website map and try to figure out the right place to put it, we almost don't want to muddy up regular tapping or search processes. So I'll definitely talk to our staff about it and see what we could do.
I think the idea is to be as concise and straightforward as possible, but good idea. That's what,
So just one last comment, because, thank you, Mr. Chair, well, I massacred his name. I just wrote to Greg, but it was Middleton. Thank you so much for correcting that, because that was my mistake.
Oh, no worries. I do a really good job butchering my names myself. So, all right, so Deputy Clerk, if you can pull the question. And that carries. So that's going to bring us to other business. So I have item P2523, memorandum regarding official plan amendments, Bill 109 and Bill 23. And I'm going to go to our Director of Planning just to kind of give a few comments on that, and then we'll see where that goes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I forget whether it was December or when it was, we took a report forward to Planning Committee about some of the changes that were unfolding at the provincial level, fast and furious, and a lot of them tied to the more houses, quicker concepts that the province is pushing out there. It's led to a number of changes and cleanups of some of our implementation policy of the official plan. So what's attached is a first draft of the changes, and it affects a lot of different sections of the official plan, from zoning and holding provisions through to site plan control and the whole bit. So before I put it in the paper or sent out notice or whatever we end up doing in terms of communication methods, I just wanted you guys to have a bit of a glance at it to see the extensiveness of some of the revisions that are probably essential in some ways to try and bolster our authority under, say, site plan control when it comes to things like urban design, pushing for things that maybe are a little weak and less clear right now. But then in other cases, it's about streamlining too. So the provisions hopefully will allow for a lot more upfront consultation through a pre-consultation process, meaning that by the time the application makes it to our desk for a public hearing here, a lot of the work has already been done and reviewed, and we're not caught in a situation where we're talking to you guys and sending studies back to the consultants because they're full of gaps and holes that we need filled. Hopefully that's been done before they get here. So that kind of language is what is reflected in the first draft of this. This is really my staff. Staff are still ready to tear me apart. So that part's yet to come.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions, comments. Going to go to item P2623, and that again, Director of Planning and Building Brian Trouble, and it's a Standpack noise matter update.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We received an email, I think it was last week, complaining again about noise tied to easterly winds in town. So I reached out to Standpack, and you know, I want to say this in the most positive way I can. Standpack has tried everything that they can think of to try and minimize noise because they want to be a good corporate citizen in this town. I have no doubt about saying that. Unfortunately, most of their efforts are running into unsuccessful solutions. They thought fans were the solution by changing the fan to quieter fans, and they thought this or the building around the silo concept was going to be the solution. And so far, none of it has quite worked to the extent they hoped. But I take it they haven't necessarily given up either. So I just wanted to share that with you, that I think the complaints have lessened, but in an east wind, we are still getting them. And, you know, Standpac has been very receptive to communicating with us and keeping us in the loop. And, you know, I'll continue to keep discussions going with them, but it's more complicated than anyone first envisioned.
Okay. Our CAO.
Thank you. Just further to that, and I think you just said that, but you're in constant contact with MOE as well, just to make sure that the noises are below the threshold that MOE deems to be adequate.
Thank you, Madam CAO. Yeah, I forgot. I also reached out to the bylaw officer with MOE, and Madam CAO is correct. The last testing they did confirmed that they comply. They're on the high end of compliance, but they still comply, so there's no violations. He is going to do further testing. I think he mentioned April as a follow-up round of testing just to monitor it. So they're on it too, but there's really no violations that they can order or force any action at this point.
Okay, perfect. I will mention the complaints have definitely slowed down. There's still complaints, but you know, I don't know if it's a matter that they've made some strive to, you know, perfecting in the imperfect, you know, situation they have, or people have just given up. I don't know. It could be one of the other there. So hopefully it's the latter. All right. So I'm going to move forward to the next item, which is members of committee of other business matters of informative nature. Any members of committee here? Not seeing any. MCO, anything?
Mr. Chair, I just have one thing, sorry.
Sure.
And it's only because we don't have another meeting before the 20th, but I just wanted to remind members of council that Community Support Services of Niagara, and under that, the Meals on Wheels flag is going up actually on the day of our meeting on the 20th at 1:30 in the afternoon. So if anybody's available and wants to come out to that, that would be great. And as I say, I only mention it here because we don't have a meeting again where it could be brought up, so.
Yeah, and for those at home, that we actually have tonight's meeting a week earlier than normal, part of the whole busyness of March break and making sure everybody can, you know, be a part of this. So, all right, not seeing any other members of the committee here, so we'll move to new business. Not seeing any new business here, which brings us to confidential matters. So I'll put the recommendation forward that the next portion of this meeting be closed to the public to consider the following pursuant to Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001. And we have 13.1, legal solicitor client privilege matter, natural severance, verbal update. The applicable closed session exemptions are advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. 13.2 is a legal solicitor client privilege matter, Ontario Land Tribunal, Helen Kazan, file number 22-00280. It's a verbal update, and the applicable closed session exemptions are advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communication necessary for that purpose, and litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. So at this point, I need a mover and seconder. I got Mayor Ganan and Councillor Braderick. So the vote is going to be to go and close regarding those matters. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of it. I'm so used to doing this part by hand. Yes, coming out of it. Okay, so. And I believe that's going to carry, but we'll wait. Perfect, so that carries. We're currently closed. And we'll be back shortly. Okay. Welcome back. The recommendation that the committee now resume an open session at the hour of 8:52 PM. If I can get a mover and seconder for that, Mayor Ganan, Councillor Chichuk, all those in favor? For the open session? Yes, sorry. We are doing it virtually, or technology-wise. Does anyone? Yeah. So we're gonna punch this in manually. Any counselors, if we could just get a. Yeah, okay, so that everybody supports coming back and open, so once it comes up, I believe we'll be, and that's carried, so we're officially back into the open section. So I gotta just read a little updates. So under item P2823, the recommendation is that the Township of West Lincoln solicitor and staff be and are hereby authorized to proceed as directed in closed session with respect to a legal solicitor-client privilege matter relating to a natural severance. If I can get a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Bradrick, Councillor Chichuk, all those involved. Sorry, we're going to do it this way as well. Sorry. Right the tail end here. So that was Councillor Bradrick and Councillor Chichuk. But I just read the one. Okay. So we'll see how this. Yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna go old school here. So all those in favor by a show of hands, and that carries. The next item, which is P2923, and the recommendation is that the Township of West Lincoln solicitor, be and is hereby authorized to proceed as directed in closed session with respect to the legal solicitor-client matter relating to Ontario Land Tribunal, Helen Kazan, file number 22-00280. So I need a mover and seconder for that. Got Councillor Rayner and Mayor Ganan. All those, I'll call the question. We'll do it old school. All those in favor? And that carries as well. At this point, we are good to go. I wish everyone a good night there, and I'm going to adjourn this meeting at the hour of 8:55 p.m.